it's going to force them to, it's going to hit too low, it's going to force them over, and that means their hands are going to hang inside of their shoulder line, so now the lines don't work. And so, you know, leave it to the manufacturers. Let's create a standard for belly putters. So it's now 41 and 43. That's our standard. So there's a 2-inch gap there. I mean, we had a player who just he fit to 42. So what should he do? Right? The bottom line is, here's an opportunity for golf professionals to really get in the game, because the way I look at it, come January, however many more players are going to move to belly putting, and I look at it like, you know what, it's a good thing. Because if I show someone where they should place their hands, which is basically going to control where their elbows hit their body, and I've measured that, and I put the belly putter just left of my belly button, right? Right away it helps people understand, okay, the shaft is square to the shoulder line, they tilt forward, and if you do that, you really can't screw it up. It's forcing you to get in the right setup. Even if you teach someone the proper setup with a conventional putter, I mean, Steve Jones knows where, you know, he's needed to be, but, you know, why did he fall back into it? Why did he get too close to it and fall back into his heels and get his lines out of position? He couldn't see himself, but he couldn't have done that with a belly putter. He couldn't do it, right? There's just no way, you know, this is all you can do. Connect it, tilt it, stand the balls of your feet, and so I just think it's going to be a lot easier for people to set up correctly and not start from a bad position. And then technically, when you think about the actual motion, and the interesting thing, I mean, up until a month ago, I fit putters and sold tons of belly putters, but never really thought through the mechanics. I basically did it. If you came to me and said, you know, I want to get a belly putter, I'm like, okay, here it is, and we fit it, and off you go. But I never really thought through mechanics until this huge surge on tour made me think through, well, why is this working so well for these players? You know, if you think about what's motivating the older players, you know, the Keegan Bradleys and the Webb Simpsons, who have been using belly putters since their college days, they're not doing it because they're bad putters. They're doing it because that's how they learn, and they're just really good. And so now you got the older players that look at the younger players going, okay, I need to rethink this. And so what's going on is the stigma is going away. Right? Now it's not bad players converting to long and belly putting because they're bad. It's just the way to putt. And so they're, you know, what makes a guy like Brad Faxon, who's a phenomenal putter, get a belly putter? What makes Ben Crane, you know, and these guys motivate? So bottom line is, what's going to happen is, we see this, is the average player is going to see the guy using the belly putter and improving, and he's going to go, okay, I want to give it a try. And he's going to walk into a golf shop, and he's going to get a choice of a 41 or 43-inch putter, and probably not someone there, especially if he's going to, you know, the big retail outlets, there's not someone there that can really help him and teach him, this is how you should set up, and this is what length it should be. And to me, a half an inch makes a difference, right? So think of it the other way. Okay, if we started telling people you need to be fit for a belly putter because it's the truth, and they do, well, now all of a sudden golf professionals that are able to do that are much more valuable than those that don't. And I just look at it like a huge opportunity. I just put 4 videos on our website on YouTube of why you have to be fit for a belly putter, and a lot about the technique, because in Chicago right away I want people to know that I know how to fit belly putters and I know how to teach belly putting, because I don't want them to make the mistake of getting the wrong length belly putter, setting up incorrectly, because they're going to basically walk away and go, it doesn't work for me. And you don't know if it works for you, because are you in the right setup and do you have the right length belly putter? So I just think it's a huge, I think it's a huge opportunity that I'm going to capitalize on, you know, in my area.
I know recently you've just been kind of doing this, you stated, but is this going to change your weights and everything, or are you doing another sheet?
Here's what here's what we're doing, and I'll talk about weights a little bit later. We make putters. Couture is my putter company, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But we make putters in 3 different weights: 335, 350, and 365 grams. Right now, as I look at what the manufacturers are doing, you know, Cameron's and, you know, TaylorMade and that, basically they're using 350 to 370 grams for belly putters. So we're just using the 365 gram head. The other thing I'm doing is I'm not putting a ski pole shaft. Originally, I was putting a thick ski pole shaft when I made belly putters that was inflexible, and I was bringing the weights up to like 395 grams. The more I've thought about it, I want the putter to feel like a conventional putter. So I'm using a regular shaft, and just, our regular shafts come raw at 37 inches, so we're just extending them. So the putter really does feel like a conventional putter, and then we're using, a 365 gram head. So we're, whatever, we make 4 different models, so we're just using the heavier weights, Kevin, at this point. And I'm going to continue to study it. I mean, I may find that I'm having a couple, some 380 gram heads milled, and I'm going to test it out and see what I think about it, test it with some players that I trust, and see. But bottom line is, I want it to feel, it needs to be a little heavier because of the mass of the grip, right? Takes away some of the feel of the head. So I'm basically building them with 365 grams in regular shafts.
Because I don't know, the science behind it.
Yeah, it's right now it's a learning process. We're all trying to figure it out pretty quickly.
I guess in a lot of our careers, when you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I like to feel that putter head, feel the putter head,"
yeah.
I think that might have been, again, I don't know, but maybe why? Because the shaft was too heavy.
The shaft was too stiff and strong. Yeah.
Yeah. You agree that the factions and those types, Ben Crenshaw's, Warren Roberts, those tended to have a little lag in their putting. They actually, were they that soft that you could see that club lagging in to impact? And then what does that mean with belly putters, where that obviously couldn't happen?
Right. Well, I mean, look at Phil Mickelson, right? I mean, that's the amazing one to me, because it's so completely different than what he's done. I mean, he's always had a huge forward press, by whatever, 5 or 6 degrees. So big forward press, kind of straight arms, kind of like this. And with that forward press, what's the counteraction to that forward press in his stroke? What is it?
His body.
His body, right? What's his head do? Goes back. Because if it didn't, he'd take a divot, right? Yeah. So he's like this. If he stayed right there with that shaft leaning forward, he'd chunk every putt. So if you watch him, he goes this way, and then at the bottom of his stroke, he goes that way. Statistically, he's not been good at short putting. He practiced it more. I've seen that guy, with Bones, that 4-foot throw where he goes around. I mean, he hits 100, 4-footers, however many times he does it a week. Well, why does he do that? Because he's got a very timing-based stroke, right? So for him to make putts, he's going like this, one, and then he goes like that, and he's got to do all that just right. Well, belly putting isn't letting him do that. So when you belly putt, we have a phrase, stand to the handle, which I talk about in the short game, but, the belly putter is just left of the center, and so as you tilt, you can't do that anymore, right? So all of a sudden, he's taking it back more with his shoulders, and his head's staying still, and he's starting to, so it's a pretty different motion for a player that's done, that action. So, the more guys do it and improve, you got to kind of pay attention to, well, why is that? I think here's one of the things I think it's really helping players with. By far, the most common error for good players is coming out of their putts. You hear commentators all that came out of it. Well, what's that mean? And Tiger talks about dragging the putter when he's playing poorly or putting poorly. What's coming out of it? Coming out of it means that your chest is opening up and it's leading the putter head. And at that point, the putter head's dragging. Well, when you look at that through impact, then the shoulders are open and the club is getting left behind. That's going to be a cut or a flip. So when you belly putt, it's helping players to stay in the putt, because if I stay connected, right, and I take it back with a bit of a shoulder turn, and then I let it come back through the square, well, the left shoulder is going to stay in the putt. It's not to open up or to come out of it, you have to disconnect. And I think that's why, like Scotty Cameron figured that out. I think that's why he does it, because technically he sees that it's simpler. And a lot of players, I know that he's told players for a long time, you should at least practice with a belly putter, because it'll get them to let the putter swing in a slight arc, square it up, and stay in the putt. My preference with a putting stroke is a slight inside backstroke to basically straight or feel straight through, and then I know obviously the further the putter goes, the more it's going to come back inside, but I like it to feel straight through impact, because I think so many people open up and cut across it. I mean, of the 22 guys that we taught today, 21 of them were going left after impact and heading off the toe, right? And I think that's the same thing yesterday. We gave 10 or 11 lessons, and it was the same thing. I feel me losing my voice here. I've been talking all day to the kids.
Todd, what do you use, belly putter or conventional?
This is my belly putter that's a week old, and I played with it once, and I did really well. So if I had to play in something that mattered, I'd probably still use my conventional putter, but I'm going to keep working with this. I mean, personally, I'm doing this because I want to learn the feel, I want to understand it so I can teach it better. And, you know, I've always been a very 50-50 centered putter. And the one thing that I feel, I can hit some poles with belly putting. And so the one thing I'm kind of feeling is almost the need to set a little more weight, move the ball up, a little more weight left, and just kind of feel like I post on that left side a little more, just so I don't have that feeling. Some players are going left hand low because they don't like the feel of, or the opportunity to maybe flip the club too much, or if it flips too early. When I videotape it, you know, that release of the left wrist, you know, the best players, it's after the ball's well gone. It's maybe 6 or 7 inches. The putter's left, or the ball's left the face of the putter. You know, then you kind of see that happen. But if it happens early, then you're going to get some pulls. You know, because again, the shoulders aren't opening up where they're going to wipe it.
What are your thoughts on where to place it? I see you're a proponent of left of the belly button.
I am.
I'd love to hear that.
The reason why, and again, you know, the way I teach putting, belly putting is just an extension of it. So even if it was conventional, and Steve, let's throw up Keever and Bird. Right, those legs. So let's talk about ball position right now. This is the 6th point to the setup. This is the ball position. So when you look at these two players, who thinks those ball positions are the same, and who thinks? Raise your hand if you think it's the same ball position. Raise your hand if you think it's different. Right. So there's a lot of non-committed people there. All right. So raise your hand if you think it's different. Come on, I want everybody to make a decision here. All right. Raise your hand if you think it's the same. So it's about 50-50. I think it's the same. And the reason why is because I'm looking up and not down.
Right.
So if I look at the shaft and where it intersects the body, it's really pretty much just left of the sternum with both players. And that makes sense to me because you can flip the light back on. Sorry for the light show here. But at any rate, it makes sense to me because when I think about, well, the best players, we know that at this point, the best players catch the ball when the putter's just starting to incline. It's about 2.5 degrees. Now, a putter is, to me, a pendulum. And so when you think about a pendulum swinging, it swings back, and as it swings back, it swings up. And so as it swings down, right, that's what's increasing its speed, by the way. That's how a player, to me, a pendulum stroke gets speed, is by increasing the length that the putter swings, because the further it swings back, the higher it swings. Well, the higher it swings, the faster it swings down because gravity is accelerating. It's like a tree falling. So once a putter head swings back, and then it comes back to the golf ball where it's increasing, it's at a constant rate of acceleration to the bottom, and then it's at a constant rate of deacceleration to the completion. That's what a pendulum does. The weight, right, as it accelerates, as it swings down, it accelerates. As it swings up, it slows down. Well, if the best players are catching the ball when the putter's just starting to incline, and you have a pendulum, if this is a fixed point, which I believe in, the head, the nose, the sternum, whatever you want to think about, if it's a fixed point, as the putter head swings, it's going to bottom out basically right at the sternum. So if I put the ball just left of center, I'm going to catch the ball when the putter just starts to incline without thinking about hitting up on it. Like, I've never told someone to hit up on it. By far, to me, there's far more people that tilt back and hit the bottom of the putter and hit unsolid putts than hit through it. I've spent more time telling people to hit through it than up on it, because if the ball is just past the center, they're going to naturally hit it when the putter's just starting to incline. So as far as belly putting or conventional putting, I basically tell people I want the butt of the club to point just left of center, just left of your belly button, and that's what creates your ball position. So if you're Jonathan Bird and you have a narrow stance and your weight's centered a little more to your left leg, the ball's going to look like it's off your left toe. If you're Kenny Perry or Stephanie Loudon or Padraig Harrington and you've got a wider stance and your weight's 50-50, the ball's going to look like it's in your center. But it's the same if you look at it to the player's sternum. You know, I tell players all the time, you know, if you're playing in windy conditions, there's nothing wrong with widening out your base a little bit. And you look at the European Tour players, traditionally have wider stances than PGA Tour players. Why is that? Playing in windier conditions, so a little more of a platform. But when you do that, you have to make sure that, you know, if you're used to looking at the ball in relation to your left foot, and then you widen your stance out, now you got a problem, because now the ball's too far forward from your center point. So that's how I look at ball position. And that's a variable that can change. You can have the ball with the player, and all of a sudden they put it just a little bit back or a little bit forward, and all of a sudden now they got a problem. But with belly putting, it's another thing that you lock in. Boom, right? Shaft is straight, tilt. Guess my ball position? It's just left of center, right? So this is another thing that makes it easier for the player to adjust or get correct every time. So here's my flip-flop and belly putting. Again, I'm telling you, 4 weeks ago, I've been like, the USGA should have outlawed it a long time ago. And how I feel about it now, you know, the purist in me is like, it's wrong, it's cheating. The realist in me is like, we need it. Because if you take the average player that's missing a lot of short putts and not enjoying golf because they can't make short putts, and it helps them putt better, and they make more putts, why in the world do we want to take anything away from the game at this point that's not helping it? You know, and if the tour is the catalyst that gets people to try it and improve and enjoy the game, well, then I think the silliest thing the USGA could do right now is we need anything that helps people play better, is the way I look at it, right? And it gives us an opportunity, professionals, to teach it better. And I'm telling my students, look, if you learn to belly putt and you do it properly, even if the USGA bans it, which is going to be quite a fight, I think, if that happens, it's going to take a while. But even if they ban it, you're still going to be better for it because you're going to learn good fundamentals with it. And so if we take it out of your hands and put a conventional putter in your hands, everything's going to be the same as far as I'm concerned, right? So I see it as a positive thing, you know, for the industry, for players, and for professionals at this point.
What's the downside to putting it more forward?
Pardon me?
What's the downside to putting it way forward? I think Freddie had his really forward.
Well, I think, you know, there's different people that are doing different things, but, you know, again, if I'm kind of like this, the downside to me is you start creating angles, you know, and we'll talk about that in the short game, but the more your hands go left of your center, the more you're going to drop your right shoulder. And to me, the benefit of belly putting is that, you know, the shoulders get a lot more level, and it's just less angles, less opportunity for mistakes.
Well, let's continue on that. What if you have distortion in your view, and you know that the ball's lined up straight, you've got the stripe and everything else, but when you go over it and you place your eyes over it, it doesn't look straight. And the only way you can get the line, you can feel the line and feel like you can put it on there, is to get out of that position and get maybe a little bit back behind that ball, or something so straight looks straight.
That might be the time that belly putter's not right for a guy when you get right down to it. I mean, it's like, you know, if you can't get a guy comfortable where he's like, he can trust it, it's not going to be right for every player. So, you know, I'm a big believer that, you know, I told the kids today, you know, there's not golf swing, putting stroke, there's not a way to do it, but there's a way for each person. And I mean, the secret is for each teacher to figure out the right way for whether it's swing the golf club or the putting stroke, whatever. It's finding the player's motion that helps them perform that they can do. That's the secret. And I certainly don't get it right every time. I mean, I probably don't get it right more often than not. But I'm trying to find that right way for each person to figure out how they're going to perform their best. So, you know, that's a really good question. You know, Scott McCarron, I taught Scott for 3 years, and, you know, I've been on a green with he and Bruce Litsky and Bernhard Longer all at the same time. Scott would tell you that he can't trust what his eyes tell him when he's over the golf ball. So, you know, Glenn Alba is a sports psychologist that he's worked with a lot, and so Scott would line the ball up, you know, with a line, and he would set up to the line from behind it where he could see, this is my start line, and then he's basically taught himself to not look at it, right? He just looks at the hole, and he goes back to the ball and he hits it. But he doesn't try to figure out if that line looks right because it doesn't look right to his eye when he's over it. So that's how he's kind of dealt with that. So, and he's, you know, traditionally a very, very good putter. So it's a great question, though. I don't know that I have the perfect answer for it. Any other questions about belly putting?
How about putting in general? Have you spent much time analyzing students when they look at the hole, or helping people look at the hole when they actually putt?
Yeah, you know, here's a thing I used to do with Steve Jones. I call it target retention. And, you know, ultimately, if someone's looking at the putter head, I mean, Bob Rotella, Robert Gomez is a guy I used to spend a lot of time with. Well, Bob Rotella had him for a while look at the hole, and as his eyes were coming back to the ball, as soon as he hit the ball, the putter was supposed to swing. He worked on that time. He'd go like this, and boom, and it would start moving. And sometimes it would even start moving when his eyes were coming back. I was like, I couldn't do that. I got to feel like I kind of get centered. But if players he was doing that because sometimes players watch the putter head, which is one of the reasons why I'm very careful about getting people too mechanical. Because you start telling them, I want you to take it inside or this or that, they'll start looking at it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's bad. Debbie Cruz did a great study called, remember the article about Quiet Eye?
Yeah.
And she has software, whatever, where she could really see what a good player's pupil was doing during the putting stroke. The best putter, their eye was very, very stable, and the worst putter, their eyes were floating around, right? Their eyes weren't quiet. So, if someone really struggles with that, in a way that you can help them is let's get set up and let's just practice hitting putts with your eyes to the hole. If that helps them, I've never seen great putters on tour do that. So I think it could be a good teaching aid. But again, if I found it working for someone, then it's a tool. Is the way I look at it, right? And of course, with Robert putted really good for about a year, kind of doing that. It really helped him get out of looking at the putter head. So it's a good tool, right? Anything that helps get results, right? If it goes in the hole, good.
Swing weight wise, they're all pretty much off the scale, I think, right? Because I get that question a lot for belly putters.
What do you mean?
If you put a belly putter on a swing weight scale, it doesn't.
Oh, they're out. Yeah. Well, they're so long. Yeah, they're just.
So a lot of kids ask me, well, can't I just extend my putter? And
well,
pretty much the ones I've tried, it's pretty much the similar line. I did one for myself last week.
The standard gram weight in the market, which has changed over the last, the old pings were, when I say old, 19, in the 80s, 90s, 280, 300 grams, 290. And now if you look at everything, it's like 330, 340, 350. Putters have gotten heavier a lot. 280 to 350 grams is a 70 gram change. We make putters at, like I said, 3 weights, 335, 350, 365. The way that we do our swing weight scale, let's talk a little bit about swing weights. If you take a putter, let's say you're working with a player, you're working with me, and I've got a 35-inch putter I bought off the shelf, and here's my setup, and you fit me, and you're like, you need 32. Okay, I got 35. I'll cut my putter down. I'm going to cut it down 3 inches. All right? So what happens if you cut a player's putter down by 3 inches? You know how many swing weights you lose? 18 swing weights. 6 swing weights per inch. And so I explain that to people. If I'm doing a clinic, I want them to understand the value and the importance of swing weight. It's gram weight of the putter. So if I put a club, and this is how I do it, when I'm doing a clinic, I show people, look, you put a club on a swing weight scale, the fulcrum is 14 inches past the end of the grip. So if I cut this end down, I'm moving the weight closer to the fulcrum, which is the same as moving it closer to your hands. It's going to feel lighter. And every inch is worth 6 swing weights. Well, to the average person, if you say the word swing weight, they don't even know what you're talking about. So I'll have everybody stand up and I'll say, okay, swing your grip. They'll go like this, and I'll swing your putter head. All right, and they go like that, and they feel the weight. I go, that's swing weight. Swing weight is your feel of the club head as it goes back and forth. Obviously, that's really important in putting because we're talking about the pendulum. So if I take a player's putter and I cut it off, 6 inches, or I'm sorry, 3 inches, it's 18 swing weights. That's equivalent to 36 grams of weight. 2 grams equal 1 swing weight. Right? Well, to make that make sense to people, that's 18 pieces of lead tape. Because, someone will go, I cut my putter down 2 inches, but I put some lead tape on it. I put 2 pieces. I'm like, you're not even close. And if they put enough lead tape on it, on the bottom, what happens then? Change the center of gravity. And my explanation for that, if you take a 21-degree 3-iron and a 21-degree hybrid, what goes higher? The hybrid. Not because it has more loft, because it has a lower CG. So when you have a putter and you put a bunch of lead tape on, enough to bring it back to the proper swing weight, I've in effect lowered the center of gravity. And even some of the manufacturers where, you look at, if I've got 5 gram weights or 10 or 15 or 20, right? Well, where are those weights in relation to the center of gravity? They're lower than the CG of the putter. So the reason I do solid mill construction is so that I can tell people the CG of our 335 and our 350 and our 365 is exactly in the center of the putter, because I know that the best putters, at impact, this is about, the bottom edge of the putter is about 1/4 inch off the ground, and the CG of the putter and the CG of the ball match, and then you're going to put the best roll in the golf ball. But if I put a bunch of tape down here, now all of a sudden I have loft. And, at 4 or 5 feet, it's not going to make a difference. There's not enough force. But at lag putting, where I really want the ball to hug the green and roll over better, right? I get a low CG putter, and I start hitting the 30, 40-foot putt with enough boom. Exactly. What am I going to get? A hybrid. I'm going to get loft. So center of gravity is something that's really overlooked, and the reason why manufacturers don't want to deal with it is because of their cost of inventory. You know, if I'm a manufacturer, a major player, and I'm releasing, 6 to 12 models per year of new whatever I'm changing, I can't get caught with inventory. And I certainly can't afford to have 36 SKUs in inventory. If I've got 12 models of putters and I'm going to carry 3 weights to maintain the center, they can't do it. I can do it because I'm not changing. I've had, your traditional plumber's neck for 6 years now. I hadn't changed at all, right? There's no reason to change it. I added a blade style putter, and something I learned about this in center of gravity, most of your blade style putters, if you look at ours versus what's in the market, the hosels are about a half an inch longer than ours. And if you look at like how I designed this, the toe is sloped up, there's a lot more weight on the toe, and there's hardly any on the heel, and the hosel is shorter. And the reason why is because I want the CG right on the sweet spot of the putter. I don't want it back on the heel, right? So to me, I want the sweet spot of every putter that we have exactly in the middle, and from top to bottom in the middle, and in the proper place in the face, so that I know that if I have a player line it up where that center line says to line it up, and they hit it there, they're going to get the best roll in the golf ball. But again, we're not carrying, I'm carrying 4 models that really aren't changing. I'm not changing so I can do it, right? And that's why manufacturers can't. So their compromise is, okay, I'll have a model with changeable weights, so I can do one model, change the weights, because it's a lot less, cost management to carry weights than it is models, right? That's how it works. So at any rate, that's a little bit about swing weight. And you think about how does it apply to the person. If you take a putter and you lighten the head weight, you throw short people, women, and they've got a 34, 35-inch putter they're gripping down on, they don't feel the putter head. And their speed control is pitiful because they don't feel the weight. So if you think about the pendulum, right, going back and forth, the distance it travels, right, controls the speed coming forward. My testing, what I think most people have is what I call a signature backstroke. And all the testing I've done, it's usually between 10 and 12 inches. It's an amazing thing. If you just start testing it, you'll see it. So you take a putter back 10 to 12 inches, right, and you have a 4-foot putt. What does your brain say? Yeah, your brain knows you have too much energy, and so the pendulum, if you just let it go, it'll create its own acceleration based on how far it goes back, it goes up. So gravity accelerates it. So if I have a 10-inch backstroke and a 4-foot putt, especially on a fast green, your brain's going, it's screaming at you, slow the putter down, right? They're deaccelerating. And then you give the same player a 50-foot putt, right, and a 10 or 12-inch backswing. It's kind of in that range. I mean, it won't always be. There's usually a 2-inch range. So then you give them a 10 to 12-inch backstroke, and you give them a 50-foot putt. What does their brain now say? Whack it. Right, so right away they go into, they're changing their tempo. The best players on tour don't change their tempo. They have pendulum strokes. So it's in 75 beats, from what I understand, and some of the testing I've done, 75 beats is pretty much the medium tempo on tour. Right, 80 would be fast, and 70 would be a slower tempo. 65 would be very slow. David Toms is a slower tempo putter. Okay, but at bottom line is the best putters, whatever their tempo is, it's always the same. From different greens to different lengths, it's always the same. But most amateurs, it's changing all the time, so it's a variable. So what I feel is that if I can get a putter that someone can feel it's balanced properly, it's not too heavy and it's not too light, it's balanced properly, then I'm going to build the setup so that we talked about the structure earlier, so that they're relaxed. Then I can get them concentrating on equal back and equal through, right? On both sides of the golf ball, then I can develop that rhythmic, consistent tempo putting stroke. You can kind of say length equates to direction, because the length of the putter is controlling all their setup positions. And then you can say weight equates to speed and distance control. What do you think is more important, distance or direction? All right. How do you feel about making 4-foot putts? I think it's really important if you want to be I think they're both equally important to each other. Because if you get a player who's really good at lag putting, right? They're going to be great at lag putting, but you give them 4 and 5 footers, and if they have poor distance control, the ball's rolling crooked off the face, they're going to be really frustrated missing their short putts, right? So I think they're equal to each other. You know, it's interesting, but the kids that we teach a lot of competitive players. And one of the things, I went to a tournament a couple years ago, and I followed the last 2 groups, and I was watching these kids, and I mean, no matter who it is, I mean, kids that they're striking the golf ball so well nowadays. Well, the kids that are striking the ball well and the leaders in the event, I mean, they're really leaving themselves, they're hitting greens in regulation, and they're typically leaving themselves 20 to 50 feet for their first putt. All right? And the kids that are winning tournaments are great at lag putting. They leave themselves, over 18 holes, if I have 10 to 20 putts, and I leave myself 4 to 5 feet, 3 feet, I'm going to miss a couple. And over a 3-day event, that's 6 shots, and that's the difference between 10th place and first place. So, my thing there was I came back and I told my staff, our kids we're going to start working them really hard. We have a drill where we put a 3-foot circle around the hole, 18 inches in diameter, and then 6 feet. And then we place, ball markers out at 30, 40, 50, 60 feet. They get 5 points for making the putt. They get 3 for being in the small circle, and 1 for being in the big circle, -1 for outside of the circle. I found that getting people to practice where you give them a score and you give them a competition, it really helps them stay focused and put some pressure on them. But anyway, so we score everything. So we get all these kids practicing their lag putting just like that, and they perform a lot better because they don't. If you don't get them practice, they don't do it. I mean, kids will put balls down from 10 or 15 feet and hit putts, and they think they're practicing. So I want them practicing lag putting, and then I want them practicing short putting, because I know that if they're short putting, they're doing good at rolling it straight, and if they're doing lag putting, they're doing good at their distance control, and I think they're become good putters. So I always practice the 2 extremes, or have my students practice the 2 extremes. So, but back to swing weight, that's why I think swing weight is so important. It's really misunderstood. So for us, it's, like I said, 335. If you look at your swing weight chart, right, I've got all the swing weights down for 335, and a regular grip is based on, we've switched our grip actually to a Lampion grip, but it's based on a 60-gram grip, okay? And then the mid-size grip, if you go 1 column over, that's based on a 78-gram grip. So if you look at 35 inches, 335 equates to D3 in swing weight. Throw a mid-size grip on it, C9. All right? You go down to 34, that 335 is now C7. Go over to 350, it's now D4. So, with a swing weight chart, you can really figure out what you want to build for someone. The way our putters come is they come raw at 37 inches, and so once someone gets fit, like at our school, if you came to our school, we have our demos, we'd figure out exactly what model you want. There's 4 different models. There's a mallet, there's a heel-shafted putter, and then, the latest one that I did this one 2 years ago, is just it's kind of our high MOI putter. Do you guys know what moment of inertia means in a way you could explain it to a student? Right, here's the way I explain it. Take a barbell, take the weights on the outside of the barbell, put them on the inside, you twist the ends faster, right? Take the weights, put them back on the outside, and the further you put them from the center, the more stable the center becomes. So all high MOI means is resistance to twisting. So if I put weights further from the center, then the center is going to become more stable, and how it applies to putting is, if it's a little off center, well, I'm going to have weight on both sides of it. We had a player who had a bullseye, just a straight blade putter, that has no moment of inertia. If you miss it, it twists, right? So at any rate, when I designed this putter, it's made out of aluminum, but there's carbide. This is a titanium face. There's carbide on the toe and in the heel and in the tail, so there's weight all the way around the exterior of the putter. And there's also a small weight right here so that it feels solid. But basically, so it's a higher MOI putter. So if you mishit it, it's just a little more stable. So those are our 4 models. And so in our school, we have all our demos. We figure out what fits someone. We take the shaft, cut it down, grip it, and they're walking away with a putter in hand. And that's important to me because I want to fit someone. I want to put the putter in their hand immediately because I want them to remember what I told them. If I order a putter and it's 3 weeks before they get it, they're going to forget what I taught them. And then it's the right setup matched to the right length putter where we're going to get the results. So that immediacy to me is really important. So that's, a little how that system works. And I'm not here to, I'm passionate about couture putters because I believe it's a way to help people and help professionals do a better job. And, I didn't bring any material about it, but if you want to learn about it, let me know and I'll get you a packet or whatever and kind of tell you about, how the system works. All right, so that's pretty good. Let's talk about short game, right? Any questions about putting? That's pretty much what I wanted to present.
What do you do with a student that comes to you that is starting to have the yips?
Yeah, that's my same question.
Yeah.
I had you back ready.
Well, with anything, no matter what the situation, what the problem is, you got to figure out what is the problem. What's the core? Why do they have the yips? Does the player have a blue nose? I mean, that's the first thing you're going to look at, right? And if so often the yips is really stuck. I can't tell you often. Like Jay Williamson told me once, he goes, I just feel, I get over to short putts and I just feel like I'm going to yip it, right? And he says, I feel so mental. And I said, well, the word fundamental, right? The word mental is a part of the word fundamental. Because, what are the yips really? The yips are your brain. There's fear in your brain, right? I'm afraid. What is fear? Fear is I'm afraid of what's about to happen. That's what fear is. Right? So if someone starts missing short putts and they do it enough times, they're afraid they're going to miss that putt. And so ultimately, if you can get rid of what's causing the fear, and a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, I see it as a fundamental problem. So if the putter's going back in a direction that's bad, if I've got, where do the yips show up? They show up in short putts. All right, if I've got a backstroke where the putter's going out and I've got a 6-inch backstroke and the putter's outside and I've got to try to get it straightened out before it hits the golf ball and I got this much space to do it, that's a problem. And it's a problem your brain's aware of. So you don't slowly kind of correct it. You quickly do something because you don't like what's about to happen. So, you have to look at the player and go, okay, is this a fundamental problem? And if it's fundamental, then fix it, right? I had a player that last year, he's a good player, he's a good amateur player, absolutely said, I got the yips like you can't believe. He said, I flinch. Well, and he did. It was like he looked at me and it was like he really did flinch. I'm like, wow, this could be the first one that's really, truly a yip, and I don't know what I'm going to do. But when I looked at him, he was set up and his hands were way outside of his shoulder line. And the minute he started his backstroke, he tipped his left shoulder, right? And then he flinched. And so, we changed his length, and it was interesting because there was a guy who was 6'4", and he had a putter that was 35, and he had long legs. I fit him to a 37-inch putter because the guy was, he's like a Dan Forsman, really long legs and short arms on top of it. And so he's down here and he's going this way, and then he looks like he's flinching, but really he's just trying to recover. So I fit him to a longer putter. I gave him a fatter grip, right? And I gave him a feel. I said, look I just want you to put your hands on the grip, and I want you to putt with your shoulders. And the guy's a phenomenal putter now. And it was a 2-lesson process, and he went from years of what he thought were the yips. It was a fundamental problem. So I guess all I'm saying is that if you looked at a player and you're like, there's no fundamental reason for this guy to yip it, well then he's really got a mental yip. And then right, or belly putting, right? So. Or even, whatever you can do. If the guy's got a problem with his right hand, well, then turn his right hand this way so that he can't use his wrist. But I'm going to do something to get it out of there. But again, I'm going to try to look at what's the real cause of the problem before I address it. I'm interested, I'm going to attend the Top 100 Teaching Summit, and I was on a committee. We chose the different presenters, and Eden Foster is going to present on the yips. So I'm really going to be interested to hear what he says, because I don't know that that's the right answer. That's just my answer right now. So I'm interested if anybody can ever really figure out what's going on. Maybe he's going to have some new information about it. We'll see. Anybody here in this room have a better explanation or ideas about the yips than what I just said? All right. So do you have an idea? Pardon me?
Have the player go left-handed.
Just change it up, right? Left hand low, is that what you're saying, or left-handed?
No, have them hold it. The way they putted right-handed, turn around and putt left-handed. Piece of cake.
Well, there you go, right? Go left-handed if the guy's got the yips. So hey, if it works, it works. All right, let's talk about the short game. What are the 2 worst shots in the short game? Not that you're faced with what people hit. What are the two worst shots?
Chunk and thin.
Yeah, chunk and thin, right? Skull. I mean, how frustrating is that for the average golfer who gets it around the green and then, does this back and forth? I mean, that'll make anybody want to quit the game. So, what causes a player to hit a skull or a fat shot? What's the actual cause of it?
Low point in the wrong place.
Exactly. The bottom of the golf swing is prior to impact. The club is swinging up. I always say that a good short game is defined by one word, and it's descent. And a bad short game is defined by one word, and it's ascent. Okay? But, when you're teaching, you want to give analogies and kind of pictures to people that they understand. So I always use a plane. I say, look, at a plane is either landing, landed, or taking off. And so is your golf club. Your golf club is either landing, landed, or taking off. And if it's taking off, when it hits the golf ball, you're in big trouble. All right? At least if it's a short game shot. So, and then I'll make the analogy of, if you looked at the National Long Drive Contest, you'd see 6-inch tees, right, and wide stances, and 50-inch drivers, and players that are kind of braced like this and tilted back. And the rise angle of those players is 5 to 6 degrees. So they're obviously hitting up on the golf ball. And what's accommodating that? Where's their spine tilted? The spine's tilted backward. So put that light off for me. Okay, so how many players do you see around the green that are tilted backward? Right? Think about it. How many players do you see that set up around the green and they're tilted backward? It's a big number. I mean, I have a short game school where I see 10 people pretty much per week. That's, you add that up over 10 years, that's a lot of people. And I can tell you that most amateurs are set up like this. They've been told, put your hands forward of the golf ball, right? Because we don't want them to use their wrist. So put your hands forward of the golf ball, but they don't understand that they need to keep their hands in the center of their body. All right, so we have a phrase, stand to the handle. And basically what I want to see is that wherever you put the handle, get your body to center to it with your spine neutral, 90 degrees to the ground. So if I want to hit a low shot, I'll put the handle forward, and then I'll stand to it. If I want to hit a high shot, I'll put the handle straight, so there's all loft in the golf club, and I stand to it. But the common denominator is the spine is always 90 degrees to the ground. It's not tilted backward. And so if you get people right away understanding that, look, when you want to hit up in the golf ball, fine, you can have a secondary tilt, right? I'm going to tilt forward. I'm going to bump my hips. I'm going to tilt backward because I'm trying to hit the golf ball with the driver ascending into a tee. But if I want the club descending, there's no reason to have backward spine tilt. So hands, set the hands wherever you want in relation to the golf ball, but make sure that they're then in the middle of the body. So that's what stand and handle is, neutral spine. If you do that, you'll get them contact. Let's take this one impact, Steve. We're just past impact. So I'm tilting backward here, and I'm blading the golf ball. And here my spine is neutral. So the bottom of my golf swing is post-impact. Right? Does that make sense to you? Flipping. Right? Everybody blames the wrist in the short game, and you're flipping the golf club. That's why you bladed it. You can turn the light back on. Phil Mickelson, I'm sure you guys have seen him hit a super lob shot, right? Does he flip it? He does, right? He flips it like crazy. He hits a golf ball, and as he hits it, right, what's he do? He flips it. But he doesn't blade it. Why doesn't he blade it?
Because
where his weight is.
The center's still forward, and the bottom of the swing arc is where it needs
past
to be.
The golf ball, exactly. So, and is his weight really on the left side? I'm not sure. We'll talk about that. But the bottom line is this is not back here. If he flipped it and his spine was backing up back here, then the bottom's back there, and then he's going to blade it, right? So he really has control of the bottom of his golf club so that the club slides under the golf ball. It slips that way, and then he folds up, and that's how he gets it to spin up in the air so fast. So wrists aren't necessarily the problem. They're usually the excuse. All right? You can use the wrist if you have control of the bottom of the golf swing, and I think great players use their wrist really effectively around the green. And be really careful about taking someone's wrist away from that, because usually that implies tension, and that creates a whole separate set of problems. So I want someone really relaxed in their hands and forearms, and I want to be able to use their wrist appropriately, but they have to be able to control the bottom of the golf swing. So I always say that, let me back up and explain the scoring zone program. Like everybody, I did short game schools, pitching and chipping. Pitch is more in the air, chips more in the ground. But I can't tell you how many times people would say, what's the difference between a pitch and chip after I just got done explaining it? Because those words don't really explain to the amateur what the shot is. So I just decided I'm changing the terminology. And I also don't think pitch and chip define the shots that you need to have a really good short game. There's not enough definition in that verbiage. So here's how I define the short game. We do mini wedge. So if you came to our short game school, the first session we'd have would be a mini wedge session, and that's 75 to 25 yards. And we put targets out at 10-yard increments at 70, 60, 50, 40, and 30. And that's a great area because, if you called me up and said, I really need some full swing work, but I want to work on my short game, I'm like, great, come to the scoring zone. Because when we work on your mini wedge play, we're going to see your full swing. And it's a great place if you've got a player who's off playing, and you ask them to stop halfway back, they can't do it because they need their whole golf swing to recover and make a loop to the golf ball. But so if you get a player on plane, they can stop anywhere at that point and come back down and catch the bottom of the golf ball because they're on plane. So mini wedge is the area where we're working on their fundamentals, their grip, their posture, their swing plane, their face. And a lot of times when I've got a player that's really bad, the first thing I'm going to do is pull out their sand wedge and start teaching them how to half shots because they have to get it right, and it's easier for them to feel. And so if I can get enough repetition in that, then I can extend it, as their clubs get longer. So that's mini wedge. That takes us to 25 yards. The next shot we teach people is a shot we call a toss shot. And that basically, the toss shot goes from 25 to 5 yards. And the reason I tell them it's a toss shot is because they can start thinking about an action. And not that pitch is bad, but I think toss is just a better word. Because I explain to people that there's times when you want to toss the ball low, and maybe I want to toss the ball low and get it to release, and sometimes I want to toss the ball low and get it to check. And so we'll teach people, how do you control trajectory? Sometimes I want to toss the ball high, right? How do you control trajectory, and how do you control spin? So we teach them that, trajectory and spin. And then we talk about, when we show them, we have different areas where we show them, okay, the ball's going to toss shot off a tight lie versus the toss shot out of rough, because I'm going to approach those shots differently, and I want to explain the difference to them. So that's the toss shot zone, 25 to 5 yards. So now we're 5 yards to the fringe, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect, 5, 6 yards, somewhere in that range. All right, so now we have 3 shots, bump and run and bump and spin. Those are 2 shots we'll teach players when you have a good lie, you have access to the back of the golf ball. Could be off the fairway. It also could be in the first cut. When the ball's sitting up, it's perched on top of the grass, right? And then hinge and hold is where you're in the rough off the edge of the green. And I know, like in Southern California, your rough's not like it is in Chicago, but in Chicago we have heavy bluegrass around the green, and you got to teach people, how do you hit that shot when the ball's down deep? In Florida there's that situation too with the different grasses there. But how do you hit that shot when the ball's down deep, and you got to get the ball out and get it to stop, because the pins are it's a specialty shot. So bump and run, bump and spin, hinge and hold. Those are the 3 shots we're teaching people from 5 paces to the fringe. And then explosion is in the bunker. All right, so there's 6 shots. And so every scoring zone program that I do, I start with a presentation of the scoring zone principles, right? There's one fundamental that's the same in all shots. What do you think that fundamental is? The club has to descend. Not always on a steep angle, by the way, right? I'm very clear with people that, the old thing of hit down to make the ball go up, that to me is incorrect. If you hit down on the golf ball with negative loft, where's it going? Down, right? It's not hitting down on it that makes it go up. It's loft that makes it go up. And some of the great players have very shot off a tight lie. They better not have a steep swing, right? They better have a shallow swing with a lot of loft where they can slide the club under the golf ball. So I want people to understand the difference of the angle of approach to the golf ball is really dictated by what's behind it. All right, so the common denominator in all those shots, the fundamental is to make sure that the bottom of the golf swing is past the golf ball, not prior to it. The principles, there's 3 principles that make up the fundamental. The first one is what I just said, stand in the handle with the spine neutral. So there's not a shot in the short game that you'll learn from us where you'll ever tilt backward. We always want your spine neutral. because I want the bottom of your golf swing in your short shot past the golf ball. That's the first principle. The second one has to do with the sequencing of the shot. Let's turn the lights off and just do this one, Steve. Okay, start at address first. Okay, so ready to dress, I'm standing to the handle, right? The club head, the handle, and my center all match up to a straight line. So the analogy that I give people this is I tell them to imagine a horse race. And so you got 3 horses in the race. You got a horse on the outside, a horse on the middle, and a horse on the inside of the track. Right? So at address, the 3 horses are matching up. And at impact, I want the 3 horses to return to that photo finish. I want them all to tie. All right, so when I take the club back, so run that back, Steve, which horse traveled further? The outside horse, obviously. He traveled from here to there. And then next, the hands, and then very little with the body. Right? So what club, if I want a photo finish, what horse has to start first? The outside horse, right? So the second principle that we teach people is to initiate your transition with the club head. I heard Stan Utley say that he tells people, throw the club head at the ball. Same thing, right? Because so many people, they get to the top of their swing, maybe we teach them to stand to the handle, their spine's neutral, but they get to the top of their swing, and they start with the inside horse, which is their legs. And when that happens, what does the spine do? Back tilts, right? And then the club lags, right? And why does that happen? Why do amateurs do that? A lot do that. Why?
They're subconsciously lifting. Subconsciously.
Not if they go like this. We're going to get to that because I think that does happen. But if a guy's going like this, is he really thinking about lifting it?
He's driving through it like full swing.
We've taught him to do that in his full swing, right? We've taught him the sequencing in his full swing is to make sure his legs start, his hips start, and his arms fall. He creates lag. And so you have to teach him there's a difference in the short game because we're not looking for the energy and the power. We're 20 yards and in right now. I want to hit a little short ball, a little short shot that's carrying inside of 20 yards. So if I start with my legs, I'm going to have back tilt, I'm going to have lag, and I'm going to have too much energy stored in the club head to hit the shot I want to hit. So now at the bottom, I'm quitting on it, right? And that's when you have really bad things happen. So I want the club head to start down, which if you think about it, right, it gets rid of lag. So lag is a detriment in the short game. Who's the best wedge player on tour? Stricker, no contest. Every category, Steve Stricker, right? How much lag does he have in the short game? He doesn't have lag, right? You watch him hit a little 50-yard shot for that matter. And he's like this. He's here, and he goes like that. He doesn't have lag. I mean, to me, one of the secrets of great wedge play is get rid of lag, which means get rid of the inside horse taking off, right? The second horse, are we at impact right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's impact. So I came back, it's all matched up, so keep going. Now, once it matches up, there's definitely a turn through in the short game. I think it's over-taught. Everybody talks about you got to turn through in the short game. Absolutely true statement. But if you do it before the club's caught up to the center, it's a blade, right? And so I try to get people to understand the club swings down in front of them, and as it matches up, I want them to turn through. So after it matches up, I want everything to stay together, right? So that's the proper time. All right, let's show lag. It's back one. Okay, here's a player. He was, I'm not going to tell you who he is, and I know you won't recognize him because he's got a hat on. But he was, last year, greens and regulation, second in proximity to the hole. Great iron player because he traps a golf ball. And I'm going to tell you, he's off the tour now, right? He lost his card. Maybe one of the worst around the green I've ever seen. So let's do impact. How about that, right? Do you think that that was learned? He absolutely worked really hard on that motion. Why? Because he was taught when he was young, don't use your wrist. So, I mean, he did a lot of these drills. You know, he put that, whatever that thing you put in the end of the grip, and practice till, you know, he could stick that club in the ground every time. So the club gets stuck, and then he knows that's coming, and then he starts backing up. He can't control the bottom of his golf swing because of that's the second horse, by the way, right? That's the from the top of his swing. You know, he's fine right here, and then what happened is the second horse, his hands led the charge, right? He got way out in front of the center or the club head, so now they can't match up. So that's the picture of the second horse. So if either the first horse or the second horse wins the race, you got a problem. So I want that club head to match up. That's kind of my big point. That's the second scoring zone principle. All right, now the last principle is just a single pivot point. Remember, 1 fundamental, 3 principles. Stand to the handle, neutral spine. Second principle, get the club head to initiate the transition. And I should ask you, what do you think the reason why a lot of people, well, we talked about legs, right? But the other thing that stops a lot of people, you give them a tight lie, you make them a little bit nervous, and the thing they'll do is they'll squeeze the club. And so that's the other reason that the club will lag too much. So I'm really trying to make sure people get relaxed and they learn that they can throw the club. As long as they have control of this, they can learn to let go of the club and get the tension out of their hands and arms and let it get back in front of them. So tension is a killer in the short game. All right, and then the last thing that I'll say is single pivot point. Now, what I mean by that is, in the short game, I want people to pivot over their forward leg. All right, so, you know, someone said earlier, people trying to lift it. Absolutely. You give an amateur that hasn't been taught this principle a shot where they've got an elevated green and a bunker, and what do? Right? What do? They try to lift it, but they do it by falling back to their back leg, so they're trying to scoop the ball in the air. So we haven't taught that person the principle. What controls loft? What controls trajectory?
Shot. Handle.
Impact.
Ultimately, what controls trajectory? Loft, right? So you need to teach that to people. If you drive the club, if you have a 9-degree driver and you drive it through the ball goes like that, and then it rises. If you have a 60-degree golf club and you drive it through the golf ball, the ball goes up, right? So the job to teach the player, your job is to deliver the club through the ball, right? So single pivot point, my point there is that, okay, if I'm going to hit a high shot, I'll stand to the handle, my weight's 50-50. I swing the club back, and as I swing it down, I pivot always around the left hip. Right? So one of the things that keeps people from doing that is when they have their stance is too wide. So we're 20 yards in right now. And so if you've got a player that has a wide stance, to get over the left leg, they're going to have too much of a shift. It's not a single pivot point. So I want their stance narrow so that when they pivot right around that left hip, without driving to it, without shifting their weight to it. It's a tighter pivot point. And then, of course, I don't want them to ever fall back into their back leg. So my favorite drill, and we have people do this so they see the repetition, and all 6 shots they learn in a scoring zone program, after we teach them the shot, I have everybody practice the right leg back drill for every shot. So if they're hitting a low toss, the hands go forward, right? Then they stand to the handle, and the right foot goes back, and then I have a practice to teach them to pivot around their left leg. If it's a high shot, weight's 50-50, so it's not leaning left. Weight's 50-50, right leg goes back, and again, pivot around the right leg. I'm careful not to over-teach weight left, because I think so many people that are afraid to get weight on the right go, okay, you got to put your weight on the left leg. Well, they lean so far left, or they lean their lower body left, which tilts their spine backward. And ultimately, even though their weight's left here, or even if it's here too much, the club would stick in the ground, right, unless they work backward. I want people to be able to move or pivot into their left side. So I'd even rather have someone 50-50 if they could move that way more efficiently than if I set them up over there and they feel like it's too steep and they get stuck and then they push themselves backward. So if it's a little bit left, it's always from the top, right, never from the bottom. And it's never to the point where they feel like they're going to get stuck, because the reaction to getting stuck will be to push back and tilt backward. So that's the 3 scoring zone principles. One fundamental, the club descends. Principle 1, stand to the handle, neutral spine. Principle 2, initiate, whatever shot it is, initiate with a club head. And principle 3, keep your feet close together and make sure that you're pivoting around your forward head. And if you get them to do that, then you'll get them to understand what's controlling the bottom of the golf swing. And even if they hit a thin shot, if at least you've given them an answer, you've helped them with their frustration. Because if you're like me, if I hit a bad shot and I can't figure out why I'm doing it, and I can't help myself, well, then I'm really frustrated. So at least if you give them an answer and then you give them a way to practice, right, then they can eventually get out of it, right? And that's pretty helpful to the guy who's going back and forth across the green, right?
At what point